The transport ship hummed quietly as it approached Paradise Station, the massive orbital campus of Andromeda University. Jake Thompson pressed his face against the small window and watched the station grow larger. It looked like a giant metal flower floating in space with dozens of sections spinning slowly around a central hub. Jake stretched his arms and yawned. The 3-week journey from Earth had been long and boring. He was tired of eating space food and sleeping in a tiny bunk. But now he was finally here, about to become the first human exchange student at the most famous alien university in the galaxy. In the seat next to him, an alien creature that looked like a walking tree made clicking sounds. Jake had learned this meant the alien was nervous. He could not blame it. Everyone on the transport had been whispering about the human passenger ever since they left Earth space. The ship docked with a soft bump. Jake grabbed his single bag and followed the other passengers through the airlock. The station's artificial gravity felt exactly like Earth's, which surprised him. He had expected something different. A tall, blue-skinned alien with 4 arms waited at the arrival gate. She wore the dark robes of a university professor and held a data pad in one of her hands. "Welcome to Paradise Station," the alien said in perfect English. "I am Professor Velith of the Xenobiology Department. You must be Jake Thompson from Earth." Jake nodded and shook one of her offered hands. Her skin felt cold and smooth like touching metal. "Thank you, Professor. I'm excited to be here." Professor Velith's large yellow eyes studied Jake carefully. "I must admit, this is the first time we have hosted a student from what the galaxy calls a death world. Your species has quite a reputation." Jake laughed. "All bad, I hope." The professor did not seem to understand the joke. She gestured for Jake to follow her through the station's corridors. The hallways were wide and bright, with soft lighting that did not hurt the eyes. Dozens of different alien species walked past them, some floating, some crawling, others moving on legs Jake could not count. "Your dormitory is in Section 7, Professor Velith explained as they walked. "You will share living space with 2 other students. We thought it best to ease you into our community gradually." They rode a quiet elevator down several levels. The dormitory section looked like a hotel, with numbered doors lining both sides of a long hallway. Professor Velith stopped at door 247 and pressed her hand against a scanner. The door slid open. "Your roommates are already here," she said. "Please try not to frighten them." Jake stepped into the room and immediately understood why the professor was worried. 2 alien students sat on opposite sides of the common area, as far apart as possible. One looked like a person made of clear crystal, with light dancing inside its body. The other was clearly built for water, with fins and gills, wearing what appeared to be a breathing suit filled with blue liquid. Both aliens stared at Jake with obvious fear. "Hello," Jake said, setting down his bag. "I am Jake. I guess we are roommates now." The crystal alien spoke first, its voice sounding like wind chimes. "I am Crix of the Helix Nebula worlds. I have heard stories about your kind." The aquatic alien bubbled something through its breathing apparatus before speaking. "Newell of the Deep Current Systems. They say your people eat other living creatures." Jake sat down on the empty couch between them. "Well, that part is true, but I promise not to eat either of you. You both look like you would taste terrible anyway." Crix's light flickered rapidly, which Jake guessed meant confusion. Newell made more bubbling sounds. "He is making humor," Professor Velith explained to them. "Humans often do this when meeting new people. It is not a threat display." Over the next hour, Professor Velith explained the basic rules of station life. Jake learned about meal schedules, class locations, and emergency procedures. Everything seemed straightforward, much like the university he had attended on Earth. "Tomorrow you will begin orientation," Professor Velith said. "We will start with basic safety training and equipment distribution. The other students have been preparing for weeks." Jake nodded. "Sounds good. How hard can it be?" Professor Velith and his roommates exchanged worried looks. The next morning, Jake joined 200 other students in the main auditorium. He was the only human in the room, and he could feel hundreds of eyes watching his every move. Some students whispered to each other and pointed at him. A small furry alien with 6 legs took the stage. "Welcome to Andromeda University," it squeaked in a high voice. "I am Director Quinn. Today we will cover essential safety procedures for life on Paradise Station." The presentation began with slides showing various emergency situations. Jake watched other students take careful notes as Director Quinn explained how to use oxygen masks. emergency food supplies, and evacuation pods. Most importantly, Director Quinn said, never attempt to lift objects weighing more than 20 standard units without assistance. Station gravity can be dangerous for those not adapted to it. Jake raised his hand. Excuse me, but how much is 20 standard units? Director Quinn checked his notes. Approximately 50 of your Earth pounds. Several students near Jake moved their seats away from him. After the presentation, everyone moved to the equipment distribution center. Students lined up to receive their standard supply packs, each containing emergency food, water, and basic tools. A robot handed each student a sealed box. Please be careful, the robot said to each student. These containers are quite heavy. Jake watched as his classmates struggled with the boxes. Crix needed to use some kind of anti-gravity device to lift his. Newell required help from 2 other aquatic students. Everyone seemed to find the boxes extremely difficult to handle. When Jake's turn came, he reached out and picked up his box with one hand. It felt like carrying a bag of groceries. The distribution center fell completely silent. Every alien student stopped what they were doing and stared at Jake. Even the robot seemed surprised. Is there something wrong with this one? Jake asked, lifting the box higher to examine it. Director Quinn rushed over, his 6 legs moving quickly. Please put that down immediately. You could injure yourself or others. Jake set the box down gently. Around him, alien students whispered frantically to each other. Some looked scared. Others seemed fascinated. I do not understand the problem, Jake said. That container weighs 70 standard units, Director Quinn explained. No student should be able to lift it without mechanical assistance. Jake looked around at all the staring faces. He was beginning to realize that his time at Andromeda University was going to be very interesting indeed. Later that afternoon, Jake met with Dr. Elena Rodriguez, the only other human on the station. She was a professor who had arrived 6 months earlier to establish the exchange program. How was your first day? She asked as they sat in her small office. Jake told her about the equipment distribution incident. Dr. Rodriguez listened and shook her head. I was afraid this might happen, she said. Jake, you need to understand something important. The curriculum here is designed for species that evolved in much gentler environments than Earth. What seems normal to you might seem impossible to them. But it was just a box, Jake said. A box that most aliens here cannot lift without help. Jake, to them you are not just strong. You are impossibly, unbelievably strong, like a superhero from their stories. Dr. Rodriguez leaned forward in her chair. I want you to try to take things slowly. Do not show off, even accidentally. These students are already intimidated by you. If you make them feel completely helpless, it will not help anyone learn. Jake nodded, though he was not sure how to be less human than he already was. There is one more thing, Dr. Rodriguez said. Tomorrow you will receive your first real assignment. The faculty has decided to test you with something they call an extreme environment challenge. What kind of challenge? 72 hours in their environmental simulator. They have set it to replicate conditions on what they classify as a moderately dangerous Class 4 world. Jake shrugged. That does not sound too bad. Dr. Rodriguez smiled sadly. Jake, no alien student has ever passed this test. They are expecting you to fail. Badly. As Jake walked back to his dormitory that evening, he thought about what Dr. Rodriguez had told him. His alien classmates were afraid of him. His professors expected him to fail. And apparently lifting a 50-pound box made him some kind of monster. He found Crix and Newell in the common room, both looking worried. We heard about your assignment tomorrow, Newell said through his breathing apparatus. The Class 4 simulation, Crix added, his crystal body flickering dimly. We are sorry. Sorry for what? Jake asked. That your time here will be so short, Newell replied. The simulation is impossible. No one survives it for more than a few hours. Jake sat down with his roommates and smiled. Well, I guess we will find out tomorrow, won't we? Neither alien seemed to find this comforting. They spent the rest of the evening telling Jake goodbye and asking if he wanted to record any final messages for his family back on Earth. Jake went to bed that night wondering what exactly he had gotten himself into. But as he drifted off to sleep, he found himself looking forward to tomorrow's challenge. After 3 weeks of sitting on a spaceship, it would be nice to finally do something interesting. Jake woke up early on the morning of his test. His roommates were already awake, sitting quietly in the common room like they were attending a funeral. Crix's crystal body barely glowed, and Newell made sad bubbling sounds in his breathing suit. "You do not have to do this," Crick said as Jake ate his breakfast. "You could tell them you are sick," Jake laughed. "I am not going to lie my way out of homework on my second day. Besides, how bad can it be?" Newell and Cricks looked at each other with what Jake was learning to recognize as alien expressions of disbelief. An hour later, Jake stood outside the Environmental Simulation Center with Professor Veleth and Director Quinn. Through a large window, he could see other students gathering to watch. Word had spread quickly through the university that the human was about to attempt the impossible test. "Are you certain you want to proceed?" Professor Veleth asked for the third time. "There is no shame in admitting that some challenges are beyond any species." "I am sure," Jake said. "What exactly am I getting into?" Director Quinn checked his data pad with his 6 legs tapping nervously. "The simulation will replicate a Class 4 world. Temperature fluctuations between 4 and 32 degrees on your Celsius scale. Gravity at 1.2 times your Earth standard. Atmospheric oxygen content at only 18%. Jake nodded. "That sounded like a cold day in Alaska with some thin air. Not exactly a vacation, but not terrible either. The terrain includes forests, rocky areas, and water sources," Professor Veleth continued. "You must survive for 72 hours with only basic clothing and simple tools." "What kind of tools?" Jake asked. "A knife, some rope, and a metal container for water," Director Quinn replied. "Most students cannot even stand upright in these conditions for more than an hour." Jake shrugged. "Sounds like camping." Both aliens stared at him. Professor Veleth made notes on her datapad, probably recording Jake's last words for the official report. The simulation chamber was huge, the size of several football fields. Inside, Jake could see rolling hills covered with strange but familiar-looking trees. A small river ran through the middle of the area, and rocky outcroppings jutted up from the ground. "The environmental controls will activate once you enter," Director Quinn explained. "Emergency extraction is available if you signal for help, but that means automatic failure." Jake stepped into the chamber. Behind him, the door sealed shut with a soft hiss. Immediately, he felt the temperature drop and the air become thinner. The gravity was slightly heavier, making each step require a tiny bit more effort. Through the observation windows, Jake could see dozens of alien students watching him. Some held what looked like recording devices. Others had pulled up chairs, expecting to watch for hours as he slowly succumbed to the harsh conditions. Jake looked around and took a deep breath. The air was thin, like being at high altitude, but nothing he had not experienced during hiking trips in Colorado. The cold was noticeable but not dangerous, similar to late autumn weather back home. He started walking, exploring the terrain to get a feel for the area. The trees were strange, with blue-green leaves and bark that felt almost like rubber, but they were clearly alive and healthy. That meant they were adapted to these conditions, which meant the environment was not as deadly as the aliens believed. After an hour of walking, Jake found a good spot to set up camp. It was a small clearing near the river, protected from wind by trees and rocks. He could see the observation windows from here, which meant the aliens could watch everything he did. First, Jake gathered firewood. The alien trees burned just like Earth would, and soon he had a cheerful fire going. Through the windows, he could see his audience leaning forward in surprise. Apparently, they had not expected him to succeed at making fire. Next, Jake used his knife to cut branches and his rope to build a simple shelter. It was not pretty, but it would keep him dry and warm. The work made him sweat despite the cold air. So he took off his jacket and rolled up his sleeves. Several alien students near the window appeared to faint. By evening of the first day, Jake had established a comfortable camp. He had caught fish from the river using a trap made from bent sticks, found edible plants that tasted like bitter lettuce, and even improved his shelter with a rain cover made from large leaves. Professor Veleth stood at the observation window with her mouth hanging open. Director Quinn kept checking his environmental readings, certain something was wrong with the simulation. "The temperature is definitely at 4 degrees Celsius," Director Quinn muttered. "The oxygen content is 18%. The gravity is 1.2 times Earth standard, but he is acting like he is on vacation." Inside the simulation, Jake sat by his fire, roasting fish and humming a song from Earth. He had found some berries that were sweet and safe to eat, and the plant roots he had dug up reminded him of potatoes. For alien survival food, dinner was not bad at all. On the second day, Jake decided to explore more of the simulation area. He had already secured food, water, and shelter, so now he could see what else the environment had to offer. He discovered that the strange rocks were actually rich in metal ore, useful for making better tools. The river had several deep pools perfect for fishing, and the forest contained at least 3 different types of edible plants. He even found a family of small creatures that looked like a cross between squirrels and lizards. Jake named the largest one Charlie and started feeding it scraps from his meals. Within hours, Charlie was sitting on Jake's shoulder, chattering in a friendly way. The aliens watching through the windows seemed horrified that Jake was making friends with the local wildlife. By the end of day 2, Jake had expanded his camp considerably. He had built a better shelter, created multiple fishing traps, established a food storage system, and even carved some basic furniture from fallen logs. He had also started a small garden, planting seeds from the fruits he had eaten to see if they would grow. The observation area was now packed with alien students, professors, and even some university administrators. Word had spread throughout Paradise Station that something unprecedented was happening in the simulation chamber. "He is not just surviving," Professor Valeth said to Director Quinn. "He is thriving. He is making improvements to the environment." "This is impossible," Director Quinn replied, all 6 of his legs tapping rapidly. "The Class 4 simulation is designed to be barely survivable for even the hardiest species. Yet he appears to be enjoying himself." Indeed, Jake was having a good time. The challenge reminded him of summer camps he had attended as a child, where learning to live outdoors was considered fun rather than torture. The environment was harsh by alien standards, but to someone who had grown up on Earth, it was just another day in nature. On the morning of the 3rd day, Jake woke up refreshed and ready for his final day in the simulation. He had slept well in his improved shelter, eaten a good breakfast of fish and berries, and even done some exercises to stay in shape. Through the observation windows, he could see that his audience had grown even larger. Aliens were pointing at him and making excited gestures. Some appeared to be taking detailed notes or measurements. Jake decided to spend his last day making final improvements to his camp. He built a better fire pit with stones from the river, created a more efficient water filtration system using sand and charcoal, and even started work on a small bridge across a narrow part of the stream. The bridge was not necessary for his survival, but Jake had noticed that Charlie and his family had trouble crossing the water. Building a bridge for alien squirrels seemed like a nice way to end his stay in the simulation. As the 72-hour mark approached, Jake packed up his few belongings and said goodbye to Charlie. The little creature seemed sad to see him go, which made Jake wish he could stay longer. In just 3 days, the simulation environment had started to feel like home. The chamber door opened and Jake walked out into a crowd of stunned alien faces. Professor Veleth and Director Quinn stood there with data pads in their hands, looking completely bewildered. "How do you feel?" Professor Veleth asked. "Pretty good," Jake replied. "A little sad to leave, actually. It was nice and quiet in there." "Sad to leave?" Director Quinn squeaked. "You wanted to stay longer in those terrible conditions?" Jake looked back at the simulation chamber, where his camp was still visible through the windows. The fire had burned down to coals, but his shelter stood strong, and his little bridge gleamed in the artificial sunlight. "It was not so bad," Jake said. "Kind of reminded me of camping trips with my dad when I was a kid. Though the gravity was a bit heavy for hiking." The aliens around him made various sounds of shock, disbelief, and what Jake was learning to recognize as the alien equivalent of nervous laughter. "Well," Professor Veleth said finally, "I believe we need to have a serious discussion about our curriculum standards." As Jake walked back to his dormitory, he noticed that other students moved out of his way in the corridors. Word had spread quickly through the station that the human had not only survived the impossible test, but had apparently enjoyed it. Crix and Newell were waiting for him in their room, both looking amazed and slightly terrified. "We watched the whole thing," Newell said through his breathing apparatus. "You made it look easy. You built things," Crix added, his crystal body flickering with nervous energy. "You made the environment better than it was before." Jake sat down on his couch and smiled. It was not that hard, really. Just basic outdoor skills. His roommate stared at him in silence for a long moment. "Jake," Crix said finally, "what exactly is it like on your planet Earth?" Jake thought about Earth's weather. Natural disasters, predators, and countless dangers that humans dealt with every single day. Pretty normal, he said. Why do you ask? Crix and Newell looked at each other again. Jake was beginning to suspect that his time at Andromeda University was going to be very educational for everyone involved. 2 days after his survival test success, Jake attended his first regular class at Andromeda University. Advanced spatial mathematics was taught by Professor Zentox, a creature that looked like an octopus made of purple metal. His classroom was filled with floating holographic equations that hurt Jake's eyes to look at directly. Today we begin hyperspace trajectory calculations, Professor Zentox announced, his voice sounding like grinding gears. This will be your most challenging assignment yet. The alien students around Jake groaned and made worried sounds. Crix's crystal body dimmed with stress, and a bird-like creature in the front row started molting feathers. Professor Zentox handed out data pads containing the assignment. You must calculate safe passage through the Vega System asteroid field while accounting for gravitational distortion from 3 different stars. The mathematics involve 17 dimensions of space-time curvature. Jake looked at his data pad. The problem looked complicated with lots of symbols he did not recognize, but the basic concept seemed simple enough. It was just calculating the best path through moving obstacles while dealing with changing forces. Like driving through traffic during a thunderstorm, but with more math. You have 2 weeks to complete this assignment, Professor Zentox continued. Most students require extensive collaboration and computational assistance to finish even half of the calculations. Around the classroom, alien students were already forming study groups and sharing resources. Jake heard them talking about renting time on the university's supercomputers and splitting the work into smaller pieces. Jake raised his hand. Professor, are we allowed to use calculators? Professor Zentox's metal tentacles writhed with what Jake guessed was surprise. Of course. You will need every computational aid available to even begin this assignment. Jake nodded and looked back at his datapad. The math really did not seem that hard. It was mostly geometry and physics, subjects he had studied in high school. The 17 dimensions part sounded scary, but when he looked closer, most of them were just different ways of measuring the same basic forces. During lunch break, Jake sat with Crix and Newell in the cafeteria. His roommates were already panicking about the assignment. We must form a study group immediately, Crix said, his light pulsing rapidly. Perhaps if we work with the students from Rigel Prime, we can share their computational matrix. I have contacted my pod siblings on my homeworld, Newell added. They are consulting the deep archives for similar problems. Jake pulled out his datapad and started working on the assignment while eating his sandwich. The first part involved mapping the positions of asteroids over time. That was just tracking moving objects, something humans did naturally when playing sports or driving cars. Jake, what are you doing? Crix asked. Starting the homework, Jake replied, not looking up from his calculations. But you need to prepare first, Newell protested. You must gather resources, form alliances, reserve computer time. Jake shrugged and kept working. The gravitational effects were more complex, but they followed predictable patterns. He had learned similar concepts in physics class when studying how planets orbited stars. This was just the same idea with more objects involved. By the time lunch ended, Jake had finished the first 3 sections of the assignment. His alien classmates stared at him like he had grown extra heads. This is impossible, Crix whispered. Those calculations should take days. It is just math, Jake said, putting away his datapad. Not really that different from planning a road trip back home. The next day, Jake attended his second mathematics class. Professor Zentox asked how the students were progressing with their assignments. I am still trying to understand the basic framework, said a slug-like creature from the back row. My study group has identified the necessary computational resources, reported the bird-like alien. When Professor Zentox looked at Jake, he simply said, I finished it yesterday. The classroom fell completely silent. Professor Zentox's metal tentacles stopped moving entirely. You finished the entire assignment? Professor Zentox asked. Yes, sir. Should I email it to you, or do you want me to present it to the class? Professor Zentox examined Jake's work on his own datapad. His tentacles began moving faster and faster as he checked the calculations. Finally, he looked up at Jake with what might have been respect or fear. Not only is this correct, Professor Zentox announced to the class, But the solution is more elegant than the one in my answer key. The alien students made various sounds of shock and disbelief. Some of them left the classroom immediately, probably to contact their families about the impossible human in their class. Word of Jake's mathematical abilities spread quickly through the university. By the end of the week, he was called to a meeting with the Academic Review Board. The board consisted of 5 professors from different departments, each representing a different alien species. They sat around a curved table in a room that smelled like ozone and fear. "Mr. Thompson," began Professor Veleth, who was apparently the board chairwoman, "we need to discuss your recent academic performance." "Am I in trouble?" Jake asked. "Not trouble exactly," said a professor who looked like a walking tree with eyes. "But your abilities are causing some concern among the faculty." Professor Zentox was there too, looking nervous. "Jake completed our most advanced assignment in less than a day. This assignment typically represents the pinnacle of mathematical achievement for graduating students. Like, we need to understand how you are doing this," added a floating professor who was just a ball of light with a voice. "Are you using some kind of enhancement technology? Illegal computational aids?" Jake laughed. "No, nothing like that. It is just basic math, the kind of stuff we learn in school on Earth." The professors looked at each other with expressions Jake could not read. "Jake," Professor Veleth said carefully, "what you call basic mathematics represents the absolute limits of what most galactic civilizations can achieve. The trajectory calculations you completed are used to plan actual space missions." "Really?" Jake asked. "That is kind of cool. Do you want me to check their work? I noticed a few places where the standard equations could be simplified." The floating professor dimmed significantly. "You want to improve our space navigation systems?" "Sure, if it would help. I mean, some of those equations are doing calculations the hard way. There are shortcuts that make everything easier." Professor Zentox made a sound like grinding metal. "Jake, those equations were developed over thousands of years by the greatest mathematical minds in the galaxy." Jake shrugged. "Well, maybe they never had to calculate flight paths while dodging traffic on the freeway." The board meeting continued for another hour, with the professors asking Jake to solve various mathematical problems. Each time, Jake provided solutions that were not only correct but simpler than the accepted methods. Finally, Professor Veleth dismissed him with instructions to continue his normal studies while they decided what to do. Outside the meeting room, Jake found Dr. Elena Rodriguez waiting for him. "How did it go?" she asked. "I think I confused them," Jake replied. "They seem worried that I am too good at math." Dr. Rodriguez smiled. "Jake, you have to understand something. Most alien species evolved on worlds where survival depended on cooperation and social harmony, not individual problem-solving. They approach mathematics like a group effort, building consensus and sharing computational load." "And humans?" Jake asked. "Humans evolved as persistence hunters and toolmakers. We solve problems individually, quickly, and intuitively. What seems impossible to them is just Tuesday afternoon homework for us." As they walked back toward the dormitory section, Dr. Rodriguez continued, "The faculty is starting to realize that everything they thought they knew about intelligence and problem-solving might be wrong." "Is that bad?" Jake asked. "Not bad," Dr. Rodriguez replied. "Just terrifying for them. You are challenging their entire educational philosophy without even trying." That evening, Jake sat in his room with Crix and Newell, working on homework for his other classes. His roommates watched in amazement as he completed assignments that they had not even started yet. "Jake," Crix said finally, "what is your home planet really like?" Jake thought about Earth with its constant disasters, changing weather, dangerous animals, and the daily problem-solving required just to survive. "Pretty normal," he said. "Everyone back home can do this kind of stuff." Crix and Newell exchanged their now familiar look of alien disbelief. "Your entire species can solve 17-dimensional mathematics in their heads?" Newell asked. "Well, maybe not 17 dimensions," Jake admitted, "but most people can handle 3 or 4 dimensions without thinking about it. We kind of have to, just to catch a baseball or park a car." His roommate stared at him in silence. "Jake," Crix said slowly, "I think we are beginning to understand why the galaxy calls your world a death world." Jake finished his homework and put away his datapad. Tomorrow he had a class on interstellar engineering, where students would design theoretical faster-than-light engines. According to the syllabus, it was supposed to be the most challenging course in the university. Jake was looking forward to it. Jake's reputation as the impossible human spread quickly through Paradise Station. Within a week, alien students started approaching him for help with their assignments. At first, Jake was happy to help, but he soon realized he might be causing more problems than he was solving. "I still do not understand how you calculated the fusion reactor output so quickly," said Beth, a four-armed alien who looked like a giant praying mantis. She had been working on the same engineering problem for 3 days. Jake looked at her homework. "You're making it too complicated. See, you just need to balance the input energy with the containment field strength. It is like balancing a budget, but with atoms instead of money." Beth's four eyes blinked in different patterns. "You compare nuclear physics to household finance?" "Sure. Energy goes in, energy comes out, and you need to make sure the container does not break. Same basic idea." Within an hour, Jake had helped Beth finish her assignment and taught her 2 other calculation methods that made the work easier. Beth left the study session looking amazed and slightly scared. The next day, Jake found a line of alien students waiting outside his dormitory room. Word had spread that the human could solve impossible problems, and everyone wanted his help. "This is getting out of hand," Crick said as Jake worked with his 5th tutoring student of the day. "Half the university is coming to you for answers." Jake was helping a crystalline being named Tom understand orbital mechanics. The concept was giving Tom trouble because his species had evolved in space and never needed to think about planetary gravity. "Think of it like dancing," Jake explained. "The planet and the moon are dancing partners. They spin around each other because they are holding hands with gravity instead of actual hands." Tom's crystal structure brightened with understanding. Like the ritual of binding that my people perform during mating season." "Exactly," Jake said, though he had no idea what Tom was talking about. "Same principle, different dance." After Tom left, Newell made worried bubbling sounds. "Jake, you are solving everyone's problems for them. They are becoming dependent on you." "I am just helping them understand the concepts," Jake replied. "But they are not learning to think for themselves," Crix pointed out. "They come to you instead of figuring things out on their own." Jake realized his roommates were right. He was supposed to be learning about alien cultures, not replacing them with human problem-solving methods. The issue became more serious during his interstellar diplomacy class. Professor Quinn gave the students a simulation exercise designed to test their negotiation skills. The scenario involved a trade dispute between 3 alien civilizations with completely different value systems. "This simulation has no correct answer," Professor Quinn explained. "It is designed to teach you about the complexity of interstellar relations. No student has ever successfully resolved all the conflicts involved." Jake read through the scenario. The first civilization valued honor above profit. The second civilization cared only about efficiency. And the third civilization made all decisions based on ancient religious texts. They were fighting over mining rights to an asteroid field that contained rare metals. The other students immediately began forming committees and planning week-long negotiation strategies. Jake raised his hand. "Professor, can I try to solve this alone?" Professor Quinn's 6 legs tapped nervously. "Well, yes, but you should understand that this scenario is deliberately impossible. It exists to show students that some problems cannot be solved." Jake spent 30 minutes reading through the details and making notes. Then he requested a meeting with representatives from all 3 civilizations. "Here is what we are going to do," Jake announced to the simulated alien representatives. "Civilization 1, you get exclusive naming rights to the asteroid field and first choice of mining locations. That gives you the honor of being the lead partner." The honor-based civilization's representative nodded approvingly. "Civilization 2, Jake continued. You provide the mining equipment and logistics. You get 60% of the actual metals because you are doing most of the work." The efficiency-focused civilization calculated quickly and agreed that this was a good deal. Civilization 3. You provide the workers and receive 30% of the metals, plus exclusive rights to establish religious sites on the asteroids. According to your holy texts, mining sacred metals brings spiritual benefits to your workers. The religious civilization's representative consulted their ancient books and declared that this arrangement was blessed by their gods. "Everyone gets what they want most," Jake concluded. "Honor, efficiency, and religious fulfillment. Plus everybody makes money." The simulation ended with all three civilizations signing a cooperation agreement. Professor Quinn stared at his computer screen like it was broken. "This is impossible," Professor Quinn muttered. "No one has ever solved the three-way trade scenario." "It was not that hard," Jake said. "You just had to give each group what they actually wanted instead of trying to make them all want the same thing." After class, Jake was approached by Mike Anderson, another human exchange student who had arrived the previous week. Mike was studying alien philosophy and ethics, and he had been watching Jake's integration with concern. "We need to talk," Mike said as they walked toward the cafeteria. "About what?" Jake asked. "About what you are doing to these alien students," Mike replied. "Jake, you are solving their problem so easily that you are making them question their own intelligence." Jake had not thought about it that way. "I am just trying to help." "I know, but look around you." Jake looked around the cafeteria. Everywhere he went, alien students pointed and whispered. Some looked at him with admiration, others with fear, and many with something that looked like despair. "They are starting to think that humans are just better than them at everything," Mike continued. "That is not healthy for anyone. So what should I do?" "Teach them how to think like humans. Do not just give them human answers. Show them the thought processes, not just the solutions." That evening, Jake called a meeting with all the students he had been tutoring. About 20 aliens showed up representing a dozen different species. "I think I have been helping you wrong," Jake announced. "Instead of giving you answers, I want to teach you how to find answers for yourselves. But your methods are too advanced for us," said Beth, the mantis-like alien. "Human thinking is beyond our capabilities." "No, it is not," Jake replied. "You are all smart. You just approach problems differently than humans do." Jake spent the next 2 hours teaching the group basic human problem-solving techniques. He explained how to break large problems into smaller pieces, how to think about multiple solutions at once, and how to use analogy and comparison to understand new concepts. "The key is not being afraid to make mistakes," Jake said. "Humans try lots of bad ideas before we find good ones, but mistakes are wasteful," protested a slug-like creature named Gary. "My people believe in careful planning to avoid errors. Sometimes making a quick mistake teaches you more than spending days trying to avoid all possible errors," Jake replied. "It is like learning to walk. You have to fall down a few times before you figure out how to balance." The alien students practiced Jake's methods on simple problems first. Slowly, they began to understand how human thinking worked. It was not that humans were smarter, but that they were comfortable with uncertainty and quick decision-making. Over the following weeks, Jake's study group began solving problems independently. They still asked for help sometimes, but they were learning to trust their own judgment and take calculated risks. The change was noticed by the faculty. Professor Zentox mentioned in class that the overall performance in mathematics had improved significantly since Jake's arrival. "It appears that human teaching methods are having a positive effect on our student body," Professor Zentox announced. "Mr. Thompson, would you be willing to assist with some of our educational research?" Jake agreed, and soon found himself working with alien professors to develop new teaching techniques that combined human and alien approaches to learning. The real test came during the mid-semester evaluations. Jake's study group was given a complex scenario involving resource management during a space station emergency. Instead of coming to Jake for answers, they worked together using the problem-solving methods he had taught them. Jake watched from across the room as his alien friends broke the problem into manageable pieces, brainstormed multiple solutions, and tested their ideas quickly, rather than trying to plan everything perfectly from the start. They solved the scenario in half the time it usually took students, and their solution was creative and effective. "We did it," Beth said excitedly after the evaluation. "We solved it ourselves." "You always could," Jake replied. "You just needed to learn to trust yourselves." That night, Jake sat with Crix and Newell in their common room. His roommate seemed different now, more confident and relaxed. "Jake," Crix said, "I have been thinking about what you said about making mistakes. I have always been afraid to try new ideas because my people value perfection. And I have always waited for group consensus before making decisions," Newell added. "But you have taught me that sometimes quick action is better than perfect planning." Jake smiled. "You are both learning to think like humans. But more importantly, you are learning to combine human thinking with your own strengths." "What do you mean?" Crix asked. Well, your crystal structure lets you process information in ways humans cannot. And Newell, your aquatic brain can hold multiple complex ideas at once. You are not becoming human. You are becoming better versions of yourselves. As the semester progressed, Jake noticed that the entire atmosphere of the university was changing. Students were more willing to take intellectual risks. Professors were experimenting with new teaching methods, and the fear of failure that had dominated the academic culture was slowly being replaced by curiosity and creativity. Jake was proud of the changes, but he also realized that his time at Andromeda University was teaching him as much as he was teaching others. He was learning that intelligence came in many forms and that humans were not necessarily better than aliens, just different. The real test of everything he had learned would come with the final semester project. But for now, Jake was content to watch his alien friends discover their own capabilities and find confidence in their unique ways of thinking. He was no longer the strange human who solved impossible problems. He was becoming a bridge between different ways of understanding the universe. 3 months into the semester, Professor Veleth made an announcement that sent waves of panic through the university. The final examination would be the legendary Galactic Crisis Simulation, a test so difficult that no student team had ever passed it completely. You will work in mixed species teams of 5, Professor Veleth explained to the assembled students. Each team must respond to a galaxy-wide emergency scenario. You will have 72 hours to develop a comprehensive solution. Jake sat in the auditorium, listening to his classmates make worried sounds. Around him, alien students whispered frantically about the impossible nature of the test. The scenario involves the collapse of the Kepler 442 star system, Professor Veleth continued. 30 billion refugees must be evacuated. Resources are limited. Political tensions between species are high. Previous student teams have never saved more than 10% of the population. A bird-like alien in the front row started molting feathers from stress. Several aquatic students had to increase the oxygen flow to their breathing suits. Teams will be assigned randomly, Professor Veleth announced. No student may choose their own teammates. Jake's team assignment appeared on his datapad that evening. He was grouped with Crix and Newell, plus 2 aliens he had never met before. Vex was a hive-minded insectoid whose species thought as a collective rather than as individuals. Tal was a gaseous being with distributed consciousness, existing as a cloud of intelligent particles that had to stay contained in a specialized suit. Their first team meeting did not go well. The scope of this crisis is beyond calculation, Vex said, her compound eyes reflecting light in patterns that hurt to look at. My hive mind cannot process variables of this magnitude. Tal's voice came from speakers in his containment suit, sounding like wind through leaves. My consciousness is distributed across multiple dimensional layers. I perceive 17 different aspects of this problem simultaneously, but they contradict each other. Jake looked at his teammates. Crix was dimming with stress. Newell was making panicked bubbling sounds, and their 2 new members seemed overwhelmed before they had even started. Okay, Jake said. Let's take this one step at a time. What exactly are we supposed to do? Vex projected a holographic display showing the crisis scenario. The Kepler 442 system contained 6 inhabited worlds with different atmospheric requirements. The star was going supernova in 30 days, and the evacuation ships could only carry a fraction of the population. 30 billion people, Tal said, his particles swirling nervously in his suit. 17 different species with incompatible life support needs. Political conflicts between the Rigel Federation and the Andromeda Alliance. Limited transportation resources. Jake studied the data. It was definitely a big problem, but like most big problems, it could be broken down into smaller, manageable pieces. Right, Jake said. First question, what are we actually trying to accomplish here? Save as many lives as possible, Crix said, his crystal body flickering weakly. Wrong, Jake replied. That is the obvious answer, but it is not the complete answer. We need to save lives, preserve civilizations, maintain political stability, and plan for long-term refugee settlement. This is not just a rescue mission, it is a complete societal transition. His teammates stared at him. How do you see all that? Newell asked. Because this is not really about moving people from point A to point B, Jake explained. This is about keeping civilization functioning while dealing with a massive crisis. Humans have experience with this kind of thing. Your species has dealt with star system evacuations? Vex asked. her hive mind voice carrying disbelief. Not star systems, but we have dealt with natural disasters, wars, famines, and refugee crises throughout our history. The scale is different, but the principles are the same. Jake walked over to the wall display and began drawing diagrams. Step 1, triage. We identify who can be moved quickly and who needs special assistance. Step 2, resource allocation. We figure out what ships, supplies, and destination worlds we have available. Step 3, logistics chains. We create systems for moving people, supplies, and information efficiently. But the political complications, Tal protested, his particles swirling faster. The Rigel Federation and Andromeda Alliance refused to cooperate. Step 4, crisis diplomacy, Jake continued. We give each political group something they want more than they want to fight with each other. Over the next 6 hours, Jake guided his team through the process of breaking the massive crisis into manageable components. They started with the simplest parts first, gradually building toward more complex solutions. Crix proved excellent at calculating resource requirements once he stopped being overwhelmed by the big picture. Newell's aquatic brain could track multiple supply chains simultaneously. Vex's hive mind thinking was perfect for coordinating thousands of evacuation ships at once. Tal's distributed consciousness could monitor refugee settlement across multiple worlds in different dimensions. We are actually doing this, Newell said on their second day. We are solving the impossible scenario. It is not impossible, Jake replied. It is just complicated. Humans deal with complicated problems by making them simple. The breakthrough came when Jake realized that the political conflict was actually an opportunity rather than an obstacle. Look, he explained to his team, the Rigel Federation has lots of ships but not many habitable worlds. The Andromeda Alliance has lots of worlds but not enough transportation. Instead of competing, they should be cooperating. But they hate each other, Vex pointed out. They hate each other less than they hate the idea of 30 billion people dying on their watch, Jake said. We just need to make cooperation look like their idea. Jake's solution was elegant in its simplicity. He proposed that the Rigel Federation be put in charge of evacuation operations, giving them the glory and political credit for the rescue mission. The Andromeda Alliance would oversee refugee settlement and long-term support, positioning them as the compassionate caregivers. Each side gets to be heroes in different ways, Jake explained. The Federation gets to be the brave rescuers, and the Alliance gets to be the wise protectors. Nobody loses face and everybody saves lives. The political framework solved, the team tackled the logistics of actually moving 30 billion people. Using human emergency management principles, they created a system of staging areas, transport hubs, and destination processing centers. The key is flow control, Jake said as they worked on their final presentation. You do not try to move everyone at once. You create a steady stream that maximizes efficiency without overwhelming any single part of the system. By the final day, Jake's team had developed a comprehensive evacuation plan that saved 28 billion lives while maintaining political stability and preserving refugee cultures. They had even included provisions for preserving important artifacts and cultural sites from the doomed worlds. I cannot believe we actually did this, Crix said as they prepared their presentation. We did it because we stopped thinking like separate species and started thinking like a team, Jake replied. Each of you contributed something essential that I could not have done alone. The presentation day arrived, and teams from across the university gathered to present their solutions to the crisis simulation. Most teams had saved between 2 and 5 billion lives. A few exceptional teams had managed to save up to 8 billion. When Jake's team presented their solution, the auditorium fell silent. They had not only saved nearly everyone, but had created a sustainable framework for long-term success. Professor Velith and the evaluation panel asked dozens of detailed questions, trying to find flaws in the plan. But the team had anticipated most problems and developed backup systems for their backup systems. How did you approach this problem? Professor Velith asked Jake directly. We treated it like a human disaster response, Jake replied. Establish command and control, secure resources, create information networks, and maintain public order while implementing the actual rescue operations. And your teammates? They taught me that alien thinking is not worse than human thinking, just different. Once we combined human crisis management with alien capabilities, the solution became obvious. The results were announced the next day. Jake's team had not only passed the simulation, but had created the most successful solution in the test's history. More importantly, their methods were being studied by real galactic emergency management agencies. "You have changed everything," Professor Veleth told Jake after the results announcement. "Not just the simulation, but our entire approach to crisis management." "We all did it together," Jake replied. "I just helped coordinate." That evening, Jake celebrated with his teammates in the university's recreation center. Crix was glowing brighter than Jake had ever seen. Newell was doing excited loops in his mobility tank, and even Vex seemed pleased despite her species' typically emotionless demeanor. "Jake," Tal said, his particles forming complex patterns in his containment suit. "My distributed consciousness has processed our collaboration across multiple dimensional frameworks. In every analysis, the conclusion is the same." "What conclusion?" Jake asked. "That human thinking is not superior to alien thinking. It is complementary to alien thinking. Together we can solve problems that neither of us could solve alone." Jake raised his drink in a toast to thinking differently together. His alien teammates responded with their own species' versions of celebration. Around them, other students watched and whispered about the impossible team that had solved the unsolvable problem. But Jake knew the truth. They had not solved it because they were smarter or better. They had solved it because they had learned to combine their different strengths instead of competing with their different weaknesses. The final semester was almost over, but Jake was beginning to think that his real education was just beginning. The results of the galactic crisis simulation spread quickly throughout Paradise Station and beyond. Within days, Jake received messages from government agencies, research institutions, and universities across the galaxy. Everyone wanted to understand how a team of students had solved a problem that had stumped experts for decades. "The Galactic Emergency Response Council wants to implement your evacuation protocols," Dr. Elena Rodriguez told Jake during their weekly meeting. "They are calling it the Thompson-Crix methodology." "It should be called the team methodology," Jake replied. "Everyone contributed something important." "That is exactly why it works," Dr. Rodriguez said with a smile. "You understand that human abilities are not about being superior to aliens, but about being different from aliens in useful ways." The weeks leading up to graduation were filled with academic conferences, research presentations, and interviews with galactic media outlets. Jake found himself representing not just human students, but a new approach to interspecies education. Professor Veleth invited Jake to speak at the annual Faculty Development Conference. The auditorium was packed with professors from universities throughout the galaxy, all wanting to understand how one human student had changed everything. "The secret is not that humans are smarter," Jake explained to the audience of alien educators. "The secret is that we learned to survive on a world that constantly tried to kill us. This made us good at solving problems quickly, taking risks and adapting to changing situations." A professor who looked like a walking coral reef raised a tentacle to ask a question. "But how do we teach these skills to students whose species evolved in stable environments?" "You do not teach them to think like humans," Jake replied. "You teach them to combine human thinking with their own natural abilities. Every species has strengths that humans do not have." Jake spent an hour explaining how his alien teammates had contributed unique capabilities to their crisis simulation success. Crix's mathematical precision, Newell's multitrack thinking, Vex's collective processing power, and Tal's multidimensional awareness had all been essential. "The goal is not to make aliens more human," Jake concluded. "The goal is to help everyone think more completely by combining different types of intelligence." After his presentation, Jake was approached by dozens of professors wanting to develop exchange programs with human universities. The idea of interspecies educational collaboration was spreading rapidly through the academic galaxy. 2 weeks before graduation, Jake received an unexpected visitor. Director Quinn arrived at his dormitory with an official-looking document. "Mr. Thompson," Director Quinn said, his 6 legs tapping nervously, "I have a proposition for you." "What kind of proposition?" Jake asked. "The university board has voted to offer you a position as Assistant Director of Interspecies Educational Development. You would help design new programs that combine human and alien learning methods." Jake was surprised. "I am just a student. I have not even graduated yet." "You are a student who has revolutionized our entire approach to education," Director Quinn replied. "We want you to stay and help us develop these new methods properly." Jake thought about the offer. He had planned to return to Earth after graduation, but the idea of continuing to work with alien students was appealing. "Can I think about it?" Jake asked. "Of course. But please know that this opportunity represents something unprecedented in galactic education." That evening, Jake discussed the offer with his roommates. Crix and Newell were both excited about the possibility of Jake staying at the university. "You could continue teaching other students," Crix said, his crystal body glowing with enthusiasm. "Imagine how many beings could benefit from your methods, and you could keep learning from us too," Newell added. "You have taught us to think like humans, but we can teach you to think like aliens." Jake realized his roommates were right. His education at Andromeda University had been about more than showing aliens how humans solved problems. He had learned that there were many different types of intelligence, and that combining them created possibilities that none of them could achieve alone. The graduation ceremony was held in the main auditorium, with thousands of students from hundreds of different species. Jake sat with his human exchange program classmates, but he found himself looking around at all the alien students he had worked with over the semester. Professor Velith gave the graduation address, speaking about how this year's class had demonstrated the power of interspecies cooperation. "This graduating class has shown us that the future of galactic civilization lies not in competition between species, but in collaboration between different types of intelligence," she announced. When Jake's name was called to receive his certificate, the entire auditorium erupted in sounds that represented cheering from dozens of different species. He walked across the stage feeling proud, not just of his own accomplishments, but of what his alien classmates had achieved. After the ceremony, Jake was surrounded by his alien friends and study group members. Beth, the mantis-like engineering student, had been accepted to the prestigious Rigel Institute of Technology. Gary, the slug-like creature who had been afraid of making mistakes, was starting his own research project on risk-taking in academic environments. "We could not have done any of this without you," Beth said, her forearms gesturing excitedly. "You taught us that being wrong sometimes is better than never trying at all." "You taught yourselves," Jake replied. "I just showed you that you were already capable of more than you thought." Tom, the crystalline being who had struggled with orbital mechanics, approached with news that he had been accepted into the Galactic Space Navigation Academy. "I never would have believed I could understand physics well enough for space navigation," Tom said, his crystal structure pulsing with pride. "But your teaching methods helped me see that I was making the problems harder than they needed to be." As the celebration continued, Jake found himself thinking about Director Quinn's offer. Looking around at his alien friends and their accomplishments, he realized he wanted to help more students discover their own capabilities. Crix and Newell found him near the refreshment table, both looking excited and nervous. "Have you decided about the job offer?" Crix asked. "I think I have," Jake replied. "But first I want to ask you both something. Would you be interested in being my teaching assistants?" "Teaching assistants?" Newell bubbled with surprise. The position would involve developing new educational programs that combine human and alien learning methods. "I would need partners who understand both approaches." Crix's light flared brightly. "You want us to help teach other students?" "I want us to work together to help other students teach themselves," Jake corrected. "Just like we learned to do during the crisis simulation." His roommates agreed immediately, and Jake found Director Quinn to accept the position offer. 3 months later, Jake stood in front of his first official class as Assistant Director of Interspecies Educational Development. The classroom was filled with eager alien students from a dozen different worlds, all wanting to learn the mysterious human problem-solving techniques. Crix and Newell flanked him at the front of the room, ready to demonstrate how alien thinking could be enhanced rather than replaced by human methods. "Welcome to Introduction to Adaptive Problem Solving," Jake announced to the class. "The first thing you need to understand is that this course is not about learning to think like humans." A tentacled creature in the front row raised an appendage. "But are we not here to learn human methods?" "You are here to learn how to think more completely," Jake replied. "Humans evolved certain problem-solving skills because we had to survive on a dangerous world. But every species in this room evolved different skills because you survived in different environments." Jake walked to the wall display and began drawing a diagram. "Your homework for today is not a problem to solve. Your homework is to teach me something that your species does naturally that humans cannot do." The students looked confused and excited in equal measure. For example, Jake continued, Crix here can process mathematical information through his crystal matrix in ways that human brains cannot match. Newell can hold multiple complex scenarios in his mind simultaneously because his aquatic brain evolved to track three-dimensional movement through water. Crix stepped forward to address the class. When Jake first arrived, I thought human intelligence was superior to mine. Now I understand that human intelligence is different from mine. When we combine them, we can solve problems that neither of us could solve alone. The goal of this course, Newell added, is not to make you think like humans. The goal is to help you discover your own unique strengths and learn how to combine them with other types of thinking. Jake smiled as he watched his alien students begin to understand. In the months since the crisis simulation, he had learned as much from his alien friends as they had learned from him. Today's lesson, Jake said, writing on the classroom display, is that there are no impossible problems, only incomplete solutions. Every species, every individual, every way of thinking adds something valuable to the complete picture. As his students began working on their assignments, Jake reflected on his journey from confused exchange student to interspecies education developer. He had come to Andromeda University thinking he would learn about alien cultures. Instead, he had learned that intelligence came in many forms, and that the real strength of any civilization lay in combining different types of thinking rather than competing between them. Through the classroom windows, Jake could see the stars of distant worlds where his graduates would eventually work. Some would become engineers, others would be diplomats or scientists or teachers, but all of them would carry forward the understanding that diversity of thought was not a weakness to be overcome, but a strength to be celebrated. The galaxy was changing, one student at a time, and Jake was proud to be part of that change. After class, Jake walked back to his new faculty apartment with Crix and Newell. They had all decided to stay at Paradise Station for another year to develop their educational programs further. Jake, Crix said as they entered their shared workspace, I have been thinking about your teaching methods. You always make complicated things seem simple. That is because most complicated things are just collections of simple things, Jake replied. The trick is not being afraid to break them apart. But why are humans so good at this? Newell asked. What made your species develop these abilities? Jake thought about Earth, with its constantly changing weather, natural disasters, predators, and countless daily challenges that required quick thinking and adaptation. I guess we had to learn to solve problems quickly, or we would not survive long enough to have children, Jake said. For millions of years, the slow problem solvers did not get to pass on their genes. And now those same abilities help you excel in academic environments that we designed to be challenging, Crix observed. Right. But the funny thing is, your species have abilities that would let you excel in environments where humans would struggle. The key is learning to recognize and use those abilities. As they worked on preparing the next day's lesson plans, Jake realized that his time at Andromeda University had taught him something important about humanity's place in the galaxy. Humans were not superior to other species, but they were not inferior either. They were simply different, with unique strengths that complemented the unique strengths of other species. The future of galactic civilization would be built on that understanding, and Jake was excited to help build it. Outside his window, the stars shone with the light of thousands of worlds, each containing species with their own ways of understanding the universe. Soon, students from those worlds would learn to combine their natural abilities with human-style problem-solving, creating new possibilities that none of them could imagine alone. Jake smiled as he wrote the final words of his lesson plan for tomorrow. The universe is not a problem to be solved, but a puzzle to be explored together. It was going to be an interesting year,